Well, the mission is a very important piece of work. Indeed, I regard it almost as a flagship piece of work for us. And what it really is seeking to provide us with a clearly articulated framework for what we do, taking our very big picture statutory objectives and saying, how do we interpret these? Now, it's not really particularly intended to change what we do. It's actually really intended to sort of distill what we do and say, let's start to turn that into a framework for conduct regulation. There are two sorts of choices I think we're talking about in the mission. There is the what I tend to call the why, which is how do we choose our general approach and how do we choose on a landscape which is very big and with very broad objectives that have been given to us by Parliament. So a good example of that would be our consumer objective. We have an operational objective with respect to consumers. We're operating on a very big landscape. So we have to make choices. Now, do we say, well, look, we interpret the consumer objective as we're protecting all consumers all of the time roughly equally, or are we making choices which say, actually there are vulnerable consumers out there who need the protection of our statutory objectives more, and that our choices take that into consideration. If we do that, and by the way, I think, as the mission document says, there are good reasons for doing that, then of course we have to answer the further questions. So how do we choose, what is vulnerable? How do we make those choices? And how do we then use our tools to address that question? Which brings me to the second point, which is what I call the how, which is how do we make choices amongst our tools? Is a market study the right way to address the particular issue at hand? Is supervision of a firm or group of firms or whole sector of firms the right way to do it? And the mission will help to explain how we answer those questions. A greater understanding of the framework that we use, both internally within the organisation and externally. It's always hard to measure these things in our world. We don't know convenient metrics that you can suddenly come up with converted into numbers. But I hope we will observe greater understanding and a greater association with what the FCA is seeking to do, so that the purpose of conduct regulation in the financial services industry becomes well established and well understood. Please give us feedback on the mission. We really welcome it. We're organising various events, so if you can come to an event, please come to an event. But whichever way you choose to do it, please give us feedback. Get in touch with us and tell us what you think. And at the end of 3 months, I hope and expect that we'll get quite a lot of comment, because it's quite green, to use the term. It's ideas, it's asking for thoughts and contributions. So I hope we'll get a lot back. We'll then work on that pretty quickly, actually, because what I want to do is then adopt a final version of it. For now, it will evolve over time. It must do that. We're a living organisation. And we can then bring it together with our business plan for next year, so that when we do our next year's business plan, we can say, well, look, here's the reference back to our framework, our mission, if you like, and explain the choices and the things that we've decided to prioritise in the business plan.